Right. All right. We have the Christian responsibility. We looked at abortion as a personal matter in great depth. I know it's an unpleasant subject for many in a lot of different ways, including me. It's a terrible, terrifying thing that a life can be destroyed in the womb. And then the corollary of that is about cloning and how ungodly that has become. They destroy an egg that is considered a person. You take a fertilized egg in the womb of a mother and remove it, you've destroyed a life. Well, then a fertilized egg outside of the womb is a life. The key to the survival, point 19, people say the key to the survival of humanity is to preserve the environment and control population. People hold to this idea even today. Dave Hunt, editor of the Berean Call, wrote this. Underlying the environmental movement is the theory that mankind is the product of evolutionary forces inherent within the universe. The scientific humanists regard these forces as impersonal, while the classical pagan or New Age the New Ager views the world as world and cosmos as a living entity, a goddess known as Mother Nature or Gaia or Mother Earth. This growing pagan spirituality, with its worship of creation instead of the Creator, it's from Romans 1:21 and 23, is the ideal for joining science and all non-Christian religions. Carl Sagan told that Earth should be regarded as sacred to encourage treating it with care and respect, not because God made it, but because it, Gaia, made us. Sagan, who rejects the biblical God, says we should revere the sun and stars. This scientific neo-pantheism is called ecotheology. Another advocate, Professor Victor Furkis, says its basic premise is that the universe is God. Atheist Mikhail Gorbachev says to bring nations together to simulate the new environmental consciousness, returning man to a sense of being a part of nature. So to require man to act as if he's part of nature is an admission that he is not. Nature's creatures need no such urging. Gorbachev has said that a conflict with nature is fundamental to our technologies. Yet conflict with nature is impossible to natural creatures. Radios, TV, cars, planes, computers, operas, and art are not natural, nor are ambulances, doctors, hospitals, and compassion. If evolutionists believe their theory, then they should shut down all medical facilities and let the weak die naturally. Except when it comes to them, then they want the doctor. Medically prolonging lives allows such persons to pass on their defects to subsequent generations. If evolution is true, then we must stop trying to find a cure for AIDS, stop treating those with the HIV virus, and let them die. Don't even bother with the coronavirus today. Since AIDS is largely a homosexual disease, it must be nature's way of wiping out those who practice what is undeniably unnatural sex, according to nature's survival of the fittest approach. The sooner those with deficiencies die, the better for our species. If stopping all assistance to the ill so that only the fittest survive sounds harsh, blame nature. That's her way. There's nothing more natural than disease, pain, death, and those calamities known as natural disasters, hurricanes, earthquakes, lightning, drought, famine, to name a few. Gaia, or Mother Nature, is anything but kind. The evolutionists attempt to have it both ways, denying a personal creator, yet insisting upon morals and compassion, which can't come from nature, betrays the lie. Animals have no concern to help their fellows, even in the face of death. If we were a natural product of evolution, then we would accept death as a natural process. After the lion has dragged down its victim, the herd pauses in its flight and grazes while the lion eats its prey nearby. In contrast, man mourns the death of his fellows and feels an inner anger against death itself. Man realizes that death is not the way things ought to be, but an enemy which has invaded our lives. Only Christ destroys death, against which science and religion have no real hope. If evolution were true and Al Gore's tree-hugging made sense, then whatever man did, from muggings to murder to war, would be a natural act. Police, courts, prisons, and criminal accusations would have to be eliminated. Animals, the wind and sea, gravity, and lightning act neither morally nor immorally, but naturally, and the same would be true of man. If it is not wrong, nature has no morals, for a volcano to spew forth poisonous gases, then neither is it wrong for man-made factories or aerosols to do the same. Nor can there be any complaint if Oregon loggers wipe out the spotted owl or whalers exterminate their prey. By destroying creatures standing in his way, man as the ultimate predator would only be fulfilling his evolutionary purpose as the fittest species, which is able to survive at the expense of all the others. Honest logic discredits the evolutionary theory behind much of the environmental movement. No impersonal natural force could design and produce a single cell, much less the brain. Only the God of the Bible could have brought moral man into existence. Thus, the solution to man's problems is not in living harmoniously with nature, as we are being told, but in being reconciled to God, who made him, and in submission to his will. This old creation is under God's judgment and will not be rescued from it, but is held in store, reserved for destruction by fire. Everything will be destroyed, and God will make a new heavens and a new earth. We must live for that eternal state and warn mankind that only those saved by the redemptive work of Christ on the cross will inhabit this new perfect universe. Robert Lee, W. Lee, the New American. History is replete with ludicrous lamentations about alleged overpopulation. Confucius and other Chinese thinkers worried about excessive population growth centuries before Christ. Plato and Aristotle fretted about it. In the Roman Empire, environmental fright peddlers proclaimed that the population growth had worn out the earth. Writing in crowded Carthage in the 2nd century after Christ, the philosopher Tertullian wailed that what most frequently meets our view and occasions complaint is our teeming population. Our numbers are burdensome to the world, which can hardly support us. In very deed, pestilence and famine and wars and earthquakes have to be regarded as a remedy for nations, as the means of pruning the luxuriance of the human race. Such unsubstantiated fright peddling has continued to haunt us in the 20th century. In his 1948 book, Our Plundered Planet, Fairfield Osborn predicted that the world would not feed more than 2 billion or so than living. In A Population Bomb, 1968, Stanford University biologist Paul Ehrlich predicted that hundreds of millions of persons would die of starvation worldwide, and that the U.S. would have food rationing by the end of the 1970s. By 1984, he predicted the United States will quite literally be dying of thirst. In 1981, the Global 2000 report to the President, commissioned by Jimmy Carter, declared that world food population per capita would increase less than 15% between 1970 and 2000, while real food prices would double. None of these dire predictions, nor anything close to them, actually occurred. Regarding the Global 2000 report, nationally syndicated environmental communist columnist Alston Chase wrote in 1989, rather than becoming more scarce, most agricultural products are increasingly abundant. An illustration of how governments can create and perpetuate poverty can be found in the case of Ethiopia during the rule of 1977 to 1991 of Marxist dictator Lieutenant Colonel Mengistu Haile Mariam. In the mid-1980s, Americans were inundated with news stories portraying the horrors of famine that eventually claimed the lives of an estimated 1 million Ethiopians. Starving children with flies crawling on their faces helped to create an impression of overpopulation. But as news commentator Paul Harvey might say, here's the rest of the story. Traditionally, Ethiopian peasants had stored food in good years as a hedge against bad harvests. But the Mengistu regime had outlawed the practice, branding it hoarding. It was also customary for peasants to invest money earned from surplus crops grown on their farms to expand production. But Mengistu attacked that practice as capitalistic accumulation and banned it. Occasionally, independent food traders would buy food in areas of the country where food was in surplus and transport it to areas where food was scarce. That free market solution to the distribution problem was besmirched as exploitation and also outlawed. A syndicated columnist Jeffrey Hart observed at the time, the starvation in Ethiopia is man-made. The destruction of Ethiopian agriculture was not a natural calamity, but the result of ideologically dictated government policy. Many densely populated countries with relatively free economies are thriving. So are seldom mentioned by the overpopulation plotters, who prefer instead to focus on those relatively sparsely populated nations with oppressive governments which are plagued with problems that can be misleadingly attributed to fecundity. Ethiopia's population density, for instance, is a scant 117 per square mile, and its per capita gross domestic product is a pitiful $121. By contrast, economically free market Singapore enjoys a per capita GDP of $13,900 despite a population density of 12,464 per square mile. Similarly, Taiwan, with a population density nearly 5 times that of Red China, 1,503 compared to 315 per square mile, respectively, produces nearly 25 times as much per capita gross national product, $8,790 compared to $360. Historically, the chief indicator of overpopulation has been the imbalance between a people and its food supply. The myth of overpopulation in 1969, Dr. Rusas Rushduni recalls that the world during its least populous eras suffered most from hunger and famine. It was only when statistic controls receded in the late 19th century, that hunger also began to recede, and Western civilization increasingly saw famine banished and hunger successfully dealt with. A far greater population enjoyed far greater supplies of food. With the rise of communism, welfare states, and other manifestations of big government in the 20th century, many of the destructive statist controls returned. The essence of the problem, then, is that Dr. Rushduni continues, socialism inevitably creates an imbalance between the number of persons living in an area and their basic economic requirements. There is, as always will be, overpopulation under socialism, and the problems which socialism spawns will be used as the excuse to further augment the size, power, and reach of government. According to Dr. Rushduni, the world does indeed face overpopulation, hunger, and famine, but only as it becomes more and more socialistic. Socialism has a poor record when it comes to elimination problems. Its answer adds up to eliminating people. In fact, one of socialism's major and chronic problems is simply people. Socialism always faces overpopulation. A free economy does not. In 1974, biologist Francis P. Felice calculated that, as summarized by Dr. Kassoun, all the people in the world could be put into the state of Texas, forming one giant city with a population density of less than that of many cities, existing cities, and leaving the rest of the world empty. University of London economics professor Dr. Peter Bauer, a leading authority of the Third World development, has written, contemporary famines and food shortages occur mostly in sparsely populated subsistence economies with abundant land. He points out that the small size of farms and the low level of agricultural productivity over most of the less developed world reflect lack of skills, ambition, and energy, or social beliefs and customs adverse to economic achievement, and not a shortage of land. When Colin Clark, former director of the Agricultural Economic Institute at Oxford University, analyzed the food-raising capabilities of the various types of land throughout the world, he concluded that if all farmers were to employ the most productive methods, sufficient food could be raised to provide an American-style diet for 35.1 billion people, more than 6 times the present world population at that time. Clark further estimated that at Japanese standards of consumption, more than 100 billion persons could be adequately fed, and the Japanese are arguably more healthy than we are. Former Harvard Center for Population Studies director Roger Revelle estimated in 1979 that the agricultural resources of the world were capable of providing an adequate diet, 2,500 kilocalories per day, as well as fiber, rubber, and beverages for 40 billion people, and that it would require the use of less than 1/4 of the Earth's ice-free land area. His figures were based on the assumption that average yields would only be one